This is the Chapter 8, Section 2 podcast, and it's an overview of photosynthesis. We're going to look at the history of photosynthesis research, the equation behind photosynthesis, and look at some of the major reactions of photosynthesis. So, first thing we have to look at is and understand is that photosynthesis is ultimately the most important process for production of energy in a cell. And the process is where green plants use the energy of the sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high energy carbohydrates and a waste product of oxygen. So there are three people we're going to talk about with the research, and this is Melvin Calvin, who I'll refer to later on the podcast. He's one of the people who contributed much to the research of photosynthesis. So Jan van Helmont wanted to basically see if plants took material out of the soil. Did they gain their mass from the soil? Is what made up a plant soil? And what he did was he took a small seedling, planted it in a pot, watered it regularly, and took careful measurements of the seedling. And what he found was that while the seedling had gained mass, he found the soil's mass was almost unchanged. So what he concluded from that was that the gain in mass came from water, because that was the only thing that he had added to the water. So the word carbohydrate, which is we're talking about energy. The word carbohydrate, the word hydrate has to do with water. So now what we have to figure out is where did the word carbo come into the word carbohydrate. And what Van Helmont didn't realize is that the plant was taking in carbon dioxide into the tree, and that was a major contribution to the mass of the tree. And carbon dioxide is actually used in the carbohydrates, and you'll see that in the equation in a moment. So another scientist named Joseph Priestley took a glass jar and he put a candle in it and he watched the flame die out. So what he thought was that there was something in the air that kept the flame burning, and we know now that something was oxygen. So what Priestley did was he took a jar with the candle and he put mint in the jar. You can see the mint here. And what he found was that after a couple days that he could relight the jar. So whatever was in the air re-entered the air for him to light. And so what it had done was produce the substance required for burning. In other words, the plant had produced oxygen. And also, it's not talked about here in the text, but he had also done experiments with animals, and the animals were able to live as long as the plant continued to produce oxygen in there. So another scientist, Ingenhouse, showed that Priestley's experiment could only be done when the plant was exposed to light. So the plant produced the chemical in the air that was needed for the mint to live, but he also found that the mint would only produce this mint would only produce the gas for the candle to burn if it was exposed to light. So light, what they showed was that light is necessary for plants to produce oxygen. And that's Ingenhouse right there, if I remember correctly. So what they found was that in the presence of light, plants transform CO2 and water into carbohydrates, and they also release oxygen. So what's the overall equation for photosynthesis? Here's the equation. 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 water molecules with light added to it creates 1 molecule of C6H12O6 and 6 molecules of oxygen. In other words, carbon dioxide plus water with light can create sugars, and that's what C6H12O6 is, and oxygen. So photosynthesis uses the energy of sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high energy sugars and oxygen. Let's just look at this equation again. If you look at the equation, we have 6 carbon atoms here, and on this side of the equation we have 6 carbon atoms. We have 6 O2, which would be 12 oxygen atoms, plus another 6 oxygen atoms. And if you look, we have, here's the 6 O2 here, and then here's the 6 oxygen there. And then here we have 6 times 2, 12 hydrogen atoms here. And you can see H12, we have 12 hydrogen atoms here. So the equation is balanced out. There's as many carbons on one side of the equation as there are on the other, and that's also true for hydrogen and oxygen. So here's an overview of the photosynthesis, how photosynthesis works, and we're going to see the 2 main reactions. So the first thing we have is light energy, and the light energy contribute to the light-depending reactions, which occur in a place in the leaf called the thylakoid. And then that releases some oxygen. We have ATP, as you can see in here, and another electron carrier called NADPH. We add into the process carbon dioxide and water, and we have the Calvin cycles occur, and this occurs in the stroma. And the Calvin cycle was named after Melvin Calvin, obviously. And from there we produce sugar after the Calvin cycle. And you can see we also have ADP cycling through here, and it's all one big large cycle between the light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. We added in a little light energy, some water, some carbon dioxide. Here, water, carbon dioxide, and more water here. And out of it we get sugar and oxygen. So what is the role of light and chlorophyll in photosynthesis? Well, how do the plants capture the energy of sunlight? They're going to need light and chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment. It's a light-absorbing molecule that's a pigment. And the main one in plants is called chlorophyll. And there are 2 main types, A and B. And here's a picture of the chlorophyll molecule. And what chlorophyll does is absorb light. And what it does really well is it absorbs it in the blue-violet spectrum, which is right here, and then also again in the red region. So what are you left with that it doesn't absorb? Well, the color it doesn't absorb is green. And because it doesn't absorb green, you can see there's very little absorption here. It reflects it, and green light is reflected by leaves, which is why plants look green. So, light is energy. It's a form of energy. So if you absorb light, you absorb energy. And when it absorbs light, it transfers this energy to electrons, raising the energy level of these electrons. And here we can see we have excited electrons here. And this is just a quick look at it. And these high energy electrons are what makes the photosynthesis work. So we'll continue on with looking at the 2 reactions, the light-dependent reactions in the Calvin cycle, and that's where the real nitty-gritty of photosynthesis occurs.